What is the worst experience you have had at a fast food restaurant? I worked at McDonald's a while ago and some kid stole something from a nearby store and got chased by the cops into our parking lot. They ended up getting cornered into our drive-thru and one of them had been shot earlier in the chase and we watched him on our cameras get out of the car and fall on the ground and die while the paramedics tried to help him. Shit was rough. Edit. I guess I should clarify something. The cops didn't shoot the guy just because he stole a couple racks of beer. They shot him because as he was trying to get away, he had a gun and was shooting at the police. That was some bad storytelling on my part. It would be nice if violence by cops wasn't a thing to be worried about, but I'm sure from the officer's perspective, it would be nice if they didn't randomly get shot at by dumbasses over petty theft. It's a complicated situation. Chipotle hands down. This wasn't really Chipotle's fault, rather an individual employee of Chipotle. This girl I was seeing and I went to Chipotle after class. She got a burrito and I got nachos. Everything was fine until I went to wake her up the next morning and she literally looked like she was dead. Took her to the ER and they admitted her immediately. She ended up spending almost a week in the hospital and almost died. Turns out someone poisoned the tomatoes and caused half a dozen people to get deathly sick. Luckily nobody died. Needless to say, I haven't been back. The 3 people ahead of me in line all complained about the wait, no more than 2-3 minutes each, despite hearing the shift manager apologizing to each person ahead of them for the wait and mentioning that 2 people had called in sick. He was running and getting everything everyone needed, and these 3 customers were so rude. When the lady ahead of me made her shitty comments about waiting so long, I told her to be patient, that they were clearly doing their best, and repeating that they were short 2 people. She snidely replied, "What? Do you work here or something?" Nope, I just have a little respect. She glared at me, got her food, then turns to everyone else in line and very loudly says, "Hope you like waiting," and storms out. I wanted to punch her. People are such dicks to retail and fast food employees. Applebee's. Every Tuesday night they have a clown called Stinky the Clown come and perform tricks for every table. Stinky accidentally hit me in the eye with his handkerchief. I woke up the next day with the worst pink eye in the entire world. I will never eat at Applebee's again. Earlier last year I was traveling through Eastern TN, and we decided to hit up this local KFC favorite that toted an all-you-can-eat buffet. The sheer novelty of an all-you-can-eat buffet overrode my common sense, so my traveling partner and I went there for dinner. It may have been, hands down, the most depressing meal I've ever eaten. The chicken was lukewarm at best. Everything kind of had this greasy film over it. The vegetables clearly were pulled out of a cheap can and more or less were nothing more than a medium 4 butter sauce. The mashed potatoes were clumpy and dry, like they had been sitting out for a week. They only gave us 3 cheap paper plates and would not supply more if asked. I thought that was weird for an all-you-can-eat buffet, but it didn't matter because after a second round, I had enough. I just had an awful feeling sitting in my stomach that felt like grease and sadness. What was worse were the people around us. The place was packed with what seemed to be locals sitting around eating a very standard weekday meal. Their bodies reflected that. Never in my life have I seen so many morbidly obese families. Children only the age of 10 were easily 3 times my weight. We returned to our hostel and I ended up puking everything over that evening. I didn't stop vomiting until I tasted my oatmeal from earlier that morning. Then I was fine. So I used to go to this Taco Bell down the street from my high school after finishing band practice with my friends. We went enough times that the drive-thru lady named Tiffany would be ecstatic to see us and give us free shit. She called us baby every time we went through. It was great. I bet you're wondering, how could any of this be bad? Well, the story takes a turn for the worst very quickly. So we do the usual Taco Bell run and order the same thing. Get the same free stuff. We get to the window and Tiffany is all smiles when her manager comes up to us and asks to see the recipe. We are kinda deer in the headlight and Tiff is nervous, So the manager grabs the recipe and asks why we are getting free food and drinks in addition to our one quesadilla. Tiff just kinda looks down and mumbles while the manager berates her on giving people free food, then fires her. She began crying and pleading for the job, saying she needed it for her son, but the manager threw her out and gave us our order, the one quesadilla of course, and said he would be keeping an eye on us. I went into a Roy Rogers restaurant once. I paid for a burger and fries. I expected there would be a cook in a kitchen somewhere who would then make a burger for me to eat, but instead I was shown a rack of stuff made a few days ago sitting under red lamps. I took one and unwrapped it. The dried up meat patty slipped out and clonked on the counter. Clonked. I looked up at the cashier and they just stared back at me. I put it back on its stale bun. There were other people in the restaurant. They were all eating this stuff like some kind of weird zombie Twilight Zone. How did these people not know there were other fast food joints, equally accessible off the highway, where for the same money a person will actually cook the meat right then and there and serve it to you, and include things like vegetables? I even saw one eat a French fry, which broke off like a pretzel stick in their mouth. Madness. That was the first and last time I entered a Roy Rogers. Driving from the Oregon coast to Seattle with a hungry family. We don't eat fast food, but traffic had been terrible and we knew we were in for a long ride, longer than normal. So we pull into a roadside Burger King because it's the only thing to be found for miles that my wife would agree to eat. Because of the traffic and lack of options, the place is packed. Tables are dirty, people aren't cleaning up their trash, workers are in a foul mood. We eat as quickly as possible and GTFO there. About half an hour later I have to pull over because I'm totally nauseous and about to blow out the back end. Luckily I found a bathroom. Wife resumes driving because I can barely hold my head up. I throw up in my empty cup of tea along the way. It starts bucketing rain. An hour in, one of my kids throws up in the car. The other completely shits himself and throws up too shortly after. I am too weak to do much about it and my wife is doing her best just to drive us home. The car reeks of vomit and diarrhea. We're about an hour from Seattle and my wife hurriedly rolls her window down and hurls. We're going 55 down the highway. She's driving, leaning her head out the window in bucketing rain. Water streaming down her face. The kids are crying from the wind and the cold and the vomit and the shit. We pull over and I resume driving while she occasionally pukes out the window. Worst road trip ever. Worst fast food experience ever. I have not eaten at a Burger King since, and this happened 12 years ago. Edit. My wife is a champ. There used to be a KFC just outside of downtown Napa, California. It was located within walking distance of a pet supply store that was happy to let customers bring their dogs, cats, goldfish, or whatever else with them while they did their shopping. Unfortunately, the proximity of these two businesses meant that some people would occasionally try to have their pets accompany them for lunch, and although the management frowned on that, they didn't do very much to curb the behavior, either. On the day in question, I had stopped into the restaurant for what I hoped would be a quick meal before a job interview. It wasn't the smartest detour, I'll admit, but to be entirely honest, the smell from outside the establishment had attracted me. Unfortunately, the moment that I walked through the front door, I was hit by an almost debilitating wave of nausea as the thick, pungent stench of wet dog filled my nostrils. It was almost enough to make me turn around and leave, but I, foolishly, decided that since I'd already made it inside, I should still get something to eat. My first mistake, if you don't count my continued presence in the restaurant, was looking for the source of the smell. I wound up making eye contact with a large woman sitting near the front counter, who was alternating between dropping ice cubes down various parts of her clothing and pouring small amounts of water onto the floor. These puddles were being consumed by an equally large dog of indeterminate breed that looked as though it had recently been in a fight with a particularly irate landfill. My second mistake was mentioning the unpleasant aroma to the girl who took my order. Although she expressed sympathy and told me that the manager had already been informed, my complaint was overheard by the woman who was responsible for the odorous beast. She yelled, sounding rather like a creaky hinge. What did you say about my dog when I didn't respond? The woman shouted again. Heh, I'm talking to you. You got a problem with my dog? Seeing no other alternative, I turned to face the woman. He doesn't smell very nice, I said. The woman replied. You got a problem with how he smells? Before I could think of a response, the woman hurled her half-full cup at me, thoroughly drenching my suit. Furthermore, it turned out that she hadn't been sharing water with the canine, but rather some kind of clear soda. I wound up having to rush away for a change of clothes before I could complain to the manager, and when I returned later on that afternoon, I was told, by another employee, that I was too late to report anything. That was the last time I visited that particular KFC. The smell, incidentally, was still lingering when I left.